Hajj is a pillar of Islam, and every Muslim who can is required to make the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in their lives. As the custodians of the two holy mosques, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is tasked with ensuring millions can make the trip safely. CCTV's Adel Mahrouky is in Mecca and has more.
For a religion of 1.5 billion, there are always more people who want to perform the Hajj than Mecca can handle. The city hosts 20 million visitors annually, 3 million of them during the annual pilgrimage.
The Islamic religion is one of the most widespread religions in the world. The number of Muslims increases every year. We are hoping Mecca will be able to receive 4.7 million visitors during the Hajj in 3 years' time.
The kingdom's ambitious plan includes expanding the holy mosques, widening roads, and building trains and other transportation infrastructure. The first phase of this mega development is set to cost $120 billion.
For the state, the Hajj is a cost center, but for the private sector, it's a profit center. An average 2 million pilgrims contribute $17 billion to the housing sector, 200 million to transportation, and about 1.2 billion to the food and beverage sector. It's a season that has a huge impact on the city's economy.
The Holy Mosque has already been expanded from 300,000 to 1.5 million square meters. Its capacity has jumped from 600,000 worshippers to 2 million. But every year, more pilgrims keep coming. Adel, CCTV, Mecca, Saudi Arabia.
To discuss why millions make the trip, we are joined from Jeddah by Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist and general manager of Al Arab News Channel. From London, we are joined by Sami Fortune, an Islamic art, history and architecture specialist. And joining us via Skype from Toronto is Haroon Siddiqui. He's a journalist with the Toronto Star and recipient of the Order of Canada, the country's highest civilian honour. Viewers can also join the discussion by tweeting comments to CCTV_America, hashtag CCTV The Heat. Let's go straight to our panel and let's start in Saudi Arabia and Jamal in Jeddah. Fill us in on the Hajj and its popularity. What was only 200,000 pilgrims in 1960 is now millions of people coming a year. Quite a spectacle.
Yes, the Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam. Every Muslim who is able to must perform the Hajj. And being able means physically and financially. That's why out of the 1 billion Muslim, only about 2 million perform the Hajj. So there is still a big ratio here. But we should also take notice that this year, maybe because of the heat, the economic declining, the number of the Hajj dropped. It is the lowest in 18 years. I performed Hajj in 1982 myself, and there were 3 million Hajjs at that time. This year, about 1 million point 8 Hajjs who performed Hajj this year.
Jamal, that seems to be a blip, though, because it's been getting bigger and bigger every year, and also Mecca is being transformed to accommodate more and more people turning up for pilgrims for the Hajj, correct?
That's true. The kingdom is forecasting for the future, expecting that the Hajjs can go up to around the 3 million figure or maybe more, and also the mini Hajj, which we call Umrah, is going to continue throughout the year. So now we have more accommodations, more hotels. The Grand Mosque has expanded dramatically. Now, in a single hour, I think 100,000 Hajjis or Muslim can circumambulate the Kaaba in one go. So Saudi Arabia is spending billions of dollars to accommodate and make it more comfortable for the Hajjis to come to Mecca and Medina and enjoy the Hajj.
Sami, in London, obviously lots of construction underway. You can see on the pictures we have behind us here in the studio, quite incredible. I suppose there's a push to accommodate as many pilgrims as possible, but also rapid development, considering you preserve a lot of what you would describe as Islamic architecture. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think the expansion will continue. I mean, the priority religiously and for the state as well is to accommodate the pilgrims. I mean, even from the 50s when Abdulaziz did the first expansions, that was always in the mind. I think at the time the mosque could only accommodate about 48,000 people. And with a growing Muslim middle class, with flight transport, all of this is increasing the need for development. Unfortunately, a lot of historic sites have been lost through the development.
Like which ones?
But, yeah. Like the Ottoman era fortress, for example, where they now have the shopping center development. For example, the House of Hadija, where the Prophet received some revelations of the Quran. There's even the house where the Prophet was born, although that's sort of underneath a library, which you can still go and see. So, I mean, for the international community, that's a concern, especially as, and from a Muslim point of view, I think historic sites are very important because we need to be able to constantly understand the religion. We need to understand it's not just good enough to have the Quran and the Hadith. We have to have sources from which we can transport ourselves back to that time, as it were, and to understand the message of Islam. I mean, there was a program that came out last year, I think, with Tom Holland, which was very critical about the traditional Islamic narrative. And it was full of holes, his program. But, you know, one of the interesting questions that came up was, you know, where's the archaeological evidence to support our, you know, traditional narrative of Islamic history? And unfortunately, there's very little left. This isn't necessarily the, I would say it's an individual's fault, or a lot of people like to blame, they say it's the Wahhabi way to destroy things. I think it's a lack of desire on behalf of perhaps the state. I mean, if you look in the 1930s, Saudi was one of the poorest countries in the world. And when you have a lack of education, there is also normally a lack of appreciation and preservation for historic sites. The people who are in power making the decisions now are of the generation that had not very much education. You know, I've met sheikhs from very big tribes, and they're fantastically, you know, educated. They can recall poetry dating back thousands of years. But in terms of a formal education and exposure to the outside world, it was very, very limited.
Right.
So I think you have to understand the developments in that context. We can't just purely be critical from a European point of view. It's terribly, terribly sad what's happened. But we have to look at it in the light of the development of the state.
Thank you. Haroon Siddiqui in Toronto, a lot of criticism about potentially the commercialization of Mecca, but this has happened at religious sites all around the world. You think of the Vatican, you can't get through without souvenir shops, Bethlehem, for example, at Christmas. This seems to happen all over the world as the popularity of these religious sites and the accessibility increases.
You see, it's, Sami was saying that there is an international outlook and an international worry about this. The worry extends right to Saudi Arabia itself. The famous architect Sami Angawi, for example, whom I interviewed, 2005 or 2004, has been raising this concern for a very long time, saying about the commercialization and so on, and the bigger it gets, the more historic sites are lost. And it's a very great argument. He himself has preserved. He was the guy who excavated the gravesite of Sheikha Khadija, for example, and preserved some of those architectural wonders. And he has incorporated into his own house in Jeddah beautiful carved old Meccan doors and windows. And so that's the concern extends to Saudi Arabia also, one. Number two, what we have are 2 or 3 broad narratives that get wrapped into one thing. The most important thing is what is happening in Saudi Arabia, as you say, is exactly the same thing as is happening in Vatican. And this is a struggle between accommodating more and more people on the one side, and B, yes, advancing commercial interest, while on the other hand, preserving and preserving the old architecture. The same argument happens in every city, including mine. Why did we not declare it a historic museum? Why did we not save that site as heritage site? Right. So this argument takes on a greater significance when this happens in Saudi Arabia, because as you said about the exponential rise of the number of people who come there, that's one. Number two, no question, because of the greater commercial interests involved, because lots of billions of dollars are being spent and billions of dollars are being made by people.
Haroon, I'm glad you mentioned the commercial aspect of this. I want to put that to Jamal Khashoggi in Jeddah. I was amazed to see the percentage of GDP that the Hajj actually brings and Mecca brings to Saudi Arabia. 3% is the estimate of Saudi GDP, $16.5 billion and climbing. More pilgrims means big business, correct?
We need to enlarge that more, because if we take a rate on investment right now, we are not winning that much right now.
With lower oil prices, it's better.
The government has spent. It is not only for the oil prices, it is for the people of Mecca and the people of Medina who should benefit from the Hajj. But if we take it as a rate of investment, the trillions that the government has spent on Mecca and Medina do not make up for the revenue we are making right now. But it is not, there is nothing wrong with making revenue for the people of Mecca and Medina. And I agree, as a Muslim who lived in Medina all my youth, when I leave the Grand Mosque in Mecca or in Medina and I see a Starbucks or a Hilton Hotel, it does annoy me. But people like that. People go to Starbucks and they have their coffee after they perform their rituals. So there is nothing we could do about that. Maybe intellectually we might write an article asking for the preservation of the heritage. But look, we are in modern world, and Muslims coming from China or from America and from the rest of the Muslim world, and they want to enjoy what they are used to, and there is a business to it, and the people accept it.
I just want to say, you mentioned the people of Mecca and Medina benefit for them, but there has been some criticism that the informal economy that relied on the Hajj, people from Mecca and Medina who made money before, are losing out now to the big developers and the big hotel chains, and also the hundreds of thousands of people who choose to make Mecca their home, even though they're not Saudi citizens, because they want to be close as possible to the holy sites, are also being pushed out of the city. So it seems there is some push and pull with who this is actually benefiting.
But Nathan, that argument can be applied in any city. I mean, we are having this argument in Vancouver, in Canada, that foreign buyers and so on are buying up homes, and they are in effect emptying out the old neighborhood. So that argument plays internationally. So it's not exclusive to Mecca. What is really forgotten most often really is the following, is that Mecca and Medina have always been a commercial center with pilgrims coming and going, and this predates Islam and the historic times. So that argument is really irrelevant by and large. The real argument here is the following. How far do you go to preserve, or is there anything left to preserve, as Sami says? That's one aspect of it. The second aspect really is also that the legitimacy of the Saudi regime is drawn partially from maintaining Mecca and Medina and making it possible for millions more of Muslims to perform the Hajj in relative comfort. On that question, no doubt whatsoever that the Saudis have taken yeoman steps to make it easier and more possible for more Muslims to go there. So what do? There is this yin and yang between those arguments, you know?
Haroon Siddiqui and everyone else will pick it up just after the break, but it's a very interesting discussion. So should what's good for the soul be good for the wallet, and are the right measures being taken to preserve the heritage of Mecca? We continue our discussion about the development of that holy city. Tweet your comments and questions using hashtag CCTV The Heat, and stay with us. We'll be back.